Hello to anyone watching this. So, the Paris 2024 Olympics are currently coming and going, and with absolutely no sign of an associated Mario and Sonic game releasing, I think we can quite safely say that the series has finally been put to rest. But instead of mourning what we've lost, I'd like to instead celebrate what we have, specifically in terms of the Dream events, because I have just always absolutely adored them. They are so consistently creative and may just be some of the most fun experiences I've had from the worlds of either of the title series. So today I just wanted to rank every single Dream event from the series, pretty much just based on how much fun I have with them, but if a setup or reference is extremely creative, it will inevitably bump up an event's ranking. But before I start, I would just like to clarify a couple things. Firstly, I'm not going to count the Plus events from Rio 2016 3DS or the Duel events from Rio 2016 on Wii U, simply because they're not called Dream events, and especially with the Plus events, they don't feel like Dream events. Like, the only ones that feel like a proper zhuzh of the regular formula are beach volleyball and table tennis. And even then, only table tennis is really fun, so I just feel like I'd be wasting time going over every single one of them and just commenting on how much more they could have done. You know, they were clearly just there to pad out Rio 2016's content. So I'm sort of glad that I can just ignore them. The other thing that I need to clarify is that I am one of very few people who didn't own a Wii U, so I can't exactly comment on how the Sochi 2014 events feel, but from what I've seen, they do control in a relatively similar way to Vancouver 2010's events, so I'm just gonna base my feeling on that. But, you know, in general, I don't think that me not playing them bumps them up too highly or lowly. And when I talk about each of these events, I'm not going to give a detailed explanation about how they control or what their rule sets are, unless I find that there's something I really want to say, because I just want to get straight into the bitching with all of these events. And like, you know, you have played all of these games, haven't you? Like, everyone remembers this series, you know, you don't need a reminder, but if you haven't played them and you don't have access to a DS and a second-hand game store, you know, you can just look up footage of all the events on YouTube and you'll get a perfect grasp on how each of them work. But, you know, if you do have the means to play one of these games and you can buy them, I'd highly recommend it. These are all really high-quality minigame collections. You know, even though some of them aren't the most content-rich, just the pure joy and anarchy of playing some of the more frantic events just cannot be beaten, and I just think this is the perfect opportunity to give this series the credit it deserves. But some of the Dream events just aren't that good, so we just need to get through some of them and then I can start gushing. So at the bottom of the barrel is Dream Boxing from Beijing DS. I swear to God, this event just does not work. I have never had any fun with it. Like, no matter how I dodge and weave, I always get hit. No matter what kind of punches I throw, they always seem to do less damage than my opponent, even if I'm playing as a power character. Just nothing about this event works. It's slow, it's unwieldy, and even as a button mashing king, the amount that I'd need to press to get up after the second knockout is just insurmountable. Like, God, did they just want to perfectly fill out the screen for dream events in this game. Like, I really don't get what the goal with this event was, you know? It barely even feels like a dream event. Like, all that's special about it are the special moves, which are just a cute little animation that they could shove into a regular event if they wanted to. But apparently that classes this event as dream because of some cute little animation, you know? Just utter travesty of an event. Completely avoided it at every possible opportunity. Next we have both fencing events from the Beijing games, which I don't have a problem playing them. They're perfectly serviceable. It's just, again, these don't really feel like they have a need to be classed as dream events. Like, all they really have over the regular versions are special moves, and this doesn't even have the luxury of boxing, where that was a dream exclusive event. Like, we have the regular version of this event in these games. Like, we can see how close they are, you know? These both just feel like filler for their dream rosters, which is a real shame. But at the same time, at this point of the series, and with the DS's hardware especially, I don't really think they could have done much more. Like, maybe have a Pianta chuck in a fruit or something to do some special thing to the match. But, you know, other than that, this event is just kind of underwhelming. Next is gliding from Vancouver Wii, which has always been a relatively infamous event just because of how random of an inclusion it is. Like, the setting of it is barely even wintry, you know? It doesn't really add much to the game, and it doesn't help that it's not really a fun event to play. Like, the arena is far too big, you know, you barely even bump into anyone, and due to the fact that you're, you know, hang gliding, it's quite tricky to turn yourself around to chase after anyone that you do bump into. And just the nature of having infinite green shells just inevitably leads to button mashing, you know, just constantly shooting out as many as you can for no other reason than hoping you can hit something. You know, there is the essence of a great event in here, it just needed a lot more tweaking than it got. Or, you know, it could have just been saved for London 2012 because it would have made just as much sense to be there as it did here. Next are both versions of table tennis from the Beijing games, which again are a victim of not really changing up that much from their base events. Like, yeah, they have the entirely different scoring system, which is interesting and overall my preferred way to play, but there's just not enough wackiness apart from that. Like, you're just in a generic arena for both of them, and, you know, that really says a lot to me. Plus, especially in Wii, the special shots feel so broken and hard to rally back. Like, especially when you get a big rally going and your opponent suddenly throws out a special shot at you, it just feels like game over. Like, just give up then, you've already lost, which is a shame, but at the same time, I can't exactly bitch about having something to make these special events more special, you know? Power shots are always worth including, it's just, with the rule set this event has, it just makes it feel more tedious and lopsided to play. Next is long jump from Beijing DS, which, when I was first putting all of these rankings together, I was kind of taken aback about how this event just kept falling lower and lower down the list as I put in all the different events, but at the end of the day, it does make sense, because while I did enjoy playing this event over and over trying to beat my score, I never knew how to beat my score. Like, no matter how well I did, no matter how many rings I chained, no matter how well I followed the wind, I just always felt like I couldn't do as well as I wanted to. You know, especially when I played against harder computer opponents, I genuinely did not understand how they were getting so far ahead of me. So I'm not sure if there was some secret technique that I didn't understand when I was a child, but this event, I just don't know how to get the best out of, and therefore I just can't have as much fun with it, unfortunately. Next is ice hockey from Vancouver Wii, which is another one where I just don't feel I can get the best out of it. Like, no matter how well I try and keep the puck to myself or try and pass it to a different teammate, I just always feel I don't get to do exactly what I want to, and the puck just gets so easily stolen by my opponents. It can just feel like a bit of a drag in the Wii version specifically. And it doesn't help that there's so many different enemies that can pop up and item boxes that just feel like they can more easily go into the hands of my opponents. This one just feels a touch lopsided. Like, I'm sure if I put more time into it, I'd understand it better, but it just feels like far too much goes on for me to be able to properly just enjoy this as a game of ice hockey, you know? Like, I'm always glad when Bowser gets to be the main reference in an event, but, you know, this time it sadly falls a bit short. Next is Ski Cross Racing from Vancouver DS, which is the first of many racing type events we're going to see. The main reason that this one is so low is due to its item system, which I've just never appreciated for this one specifically. Like, this has lightning, blue shells and red shells, meanwhile only having barriers and stars as defense items, which I never really feel like I get in first place. So it just ends up feeling kind of luck of the draw whether someone behind you gets an item that can bugger you just before the finish line, which, you know, I can never really think of as fun, which is a real shame because the course in this event is so darling. Like, it's just so cozy and wintry despite being like, you know, having waterfalls and seemingly being quite coastal. It's just the sort of cozy winter vibes that this track has. I just feel needs special mentioning. But yeah, I mean, I think it's quite sad to say, but I think this event will work better without an item system, which is just something that never should be said, and is just sort of a testament to how this is quite a underwhelming racing event. Next is Karate from Tokyo, which, considering that that game only had 3 dream events, you'd hope that all of them would be really good, so for its lowest to be this relatively low is kind of a shame. But I do think this is an overall fun event with a fun rule set. Kind of a weird setting that just seems sort of arbitrary to reference the most recent Mario game, but, you know, I can look past that. It's just my main issue with this event is the hit detection on the tiles. Like, especially playing against a power character, it's just extremely annoying how finicky the hit detection on them is, and just how hard it can be to activate all of the ones that you want to when you chuck someone onto them. So I do really love this event in concept, and even playing it a lot of the time, I just wish you had a bit more consistency with the tiles, or even if it was overly generous with tiles so that they can all be filled out more quickly and taken over more quickly. It just feels like this event lacks just a slight bit of franticness that it needed to be truly amazing. Next is Rocket Ski Jumping from Vancouver DS, which is another event that in general I enjoy playing. It's just a bit slow. Like, after you go off the ramp and you're using up your rocket fuel, it's just really slow. You know, you don't move that fast. It's quite easy to get the rings and items that you want. And even after you start gracefully floating down, even that doesn't really have that much momentum. So there's really not a lot else I can say. Like, it works in concept. I just wish that it had a bit of a faster pace and therefore a bit more challenge to it, rather than just feeling the same kind of predictable pattern each time of just float over to a ring, float over to a box, and float down. Next is Shooting from Beijing DS, which is one that I generally find to be really fun. It's just something about its control scheme can just slightly get in the way, like the combination of having to move the crosshair using the stylus and then pressing a different button to shoot just sort of inherently means that you're accidentally going to jostle the stylus away from the point that you want it to now and then, and it just makes the event slightly less fun. And it also makes me painfully aware of how the CPU have an advantage in this event, because, you know, they don't have to deal with human error and stuff. Plus it feels like they do have a bit too good of a reaction time to like the putting up of shields and the character balloons coming in. As this event feels ever so slightly weighted, like not in a painfully bad way, but just in one that I've been able to pick up on, and it just slightly brings this one down for me, unfortunately. But don't get it twisted, it is still fun, and I assume with human players it's like one of the best, but you know, I wouldn't know about having 3 people with this game that I could just connect to and play with. Next is Ultimate Figure Skating from Vancouver DS, which is weird to say, but I think this event's just a bit too free and open for its own good. Like, when you put a string of things to collect in front of me, come hell or high heaven, I will collect all of them. So having to like awkwardly just flip myself round to grab a ring I've missed, you know, it's not the most natural, but the rest of the minigame just plays really well. It's just weird that it even lets you go back and collect rings, considering that you have plenty enough time to do so, and it just almost gives the minigame a kind of off flow to it. And while I'm not trying to compare the handheld to the console version of events, the console Dream Figure Skating events are just so incredibly bombastic that to just have this quaint little frozen lake to skate over and hop off jump pads, it's just kind of incomparable. So while I do appreciate what this event gives us, it just can't compare to what comes after it. Next is Snowball Scrimmage from Sochi, which is the only event from that game that I'm kind of unsure if I'm being too nice or too harsh to it, because just the whole notion of having to defenselessly roll quite slowly towards a goal behind several walls just sounds like it'd be a nightmare for me. Like, I'd have absolutely no control of my destiny. It would just be desperately hoping that the AI are too stupid to realise I'm on the ball. But away from that, this doesn't seem like it has a lot to it. Like, the snow guns seem quite interesting, but again, because of how you want to spend as much time as possible on the ball, it just doesn't seem you get as much use as you want to out of them if you're going on the offensive. So this just seems like a sort of clumsy way to implement football in a game that really didn't need to have football, and it just pales in comparison to the other snowball themed event. Like, they really could have just done another snowball fight and it would have ended up just fine, but I appreciate that they at least tried to do something different, even if it really didn't land. Next is Snow Day Street Hockey, which might just be the event that I have the least to say about, because it seems to play quite similarly to Dream Ice Hockey from Vancouver, so it doesn't really feel like I have much to add on top of it. Apart from that, the hazards seem way less intrusive, and the fact that there's multiple arenas that you can play on in the same match is really cool. So, you know, the only thing that I can't really comment on is the blooming gamepad implementation that's arbitrary, but, you know, it probably made scoring or defending or whatever more fun. Next is Alpine from Vancouver Wii, which is the point in this list where I really don't have that many gripes with events. There's just one little nag that just sort of brings it down compared to everything else. And for this event, it's definitely its obstacles, which at points just seem unfair and kind of arbitrary depending on where you are in the race. Then it just sort of feels like it impedes you at the worst time when you're in the worst position, and it just doesn't help the flow of this event, especially when there are so many cool alternate paths that it just feels like I can never get to because of how they can be blocked off. But apart from that, it's a really fun course with plenty of variety and a good item set. It's just, again, I feel like its obstacles just inhibit its flow ever so slightly. Next is Uneven Bars from London, which, when you can get a good flow going and can properly chain between bar after bar, it's a lot of fun, especially when you can hog one to yourself. It's just the way that all of the bars are put together, it just makes it inevitable that you just can't go the exact way that you want to. Like, there'll always be someone in your way, and obviously you can just hook onto their feet and get more points, but it never feels like I can do that successfully. Like, I don't know if it's a pure timing thing, or just kind of I'm not aiming myself properly at their feet, which is a sentence that I really should never say out loud again. It just feels like I can't control this in the exact way I want to, but again, when it all comes together, it really comes together with this minigame. It's just, I don't know, I really love the high score based ones, but I just don't see any point of even trying for a high score here, so that's its biggest downfall. Next is Ski Cross from Vancouver Wii, the mildly superior skiing event from that game. Mainly because, obviously, as you can probably guess, the obstacles are far less intrusive compared to Alpine, and I feel like the split path gimmick that it has in the middle is really cool. It's just something about the sense of speed that skiing has in this game. It just doesn't feel like it properly complements this course. Like, some of the turns and straightaways just feel needlessly harsh with how the skis control, which I can easily get past, and I do have a lot of fun with this. It's just, at points, I do feel like I don't have the most grasp of where I can go, and you know, it just doesn't feel as intuitive. Plus, of course, the bloody cannon section at the end where you have to frantically attempt to match the shapes to do tricks, and I always so happen to do one at the perfect timing to land on the ground in the middle of it and fail it, and it's all for nothing. So yeah, this is a better course overall. It just still has a couple things that don't really feel the best for me, but you know, if I'm going to play skiing in this game, I'm more than happy to play on this course. Next is Discus from London, which is similar to Uneven Bars in the way that if I can get a good run going, it's so satisfying, but I just find it's way too easy to be bumped off course, and it's like, yeah, you can charge up and properly punt someone away, but it feels like the charge takes a bit too long and it's too easy to have it backfire on you and be punted out the way while you're charging up. So again, I really enjoy the flow that this minigame can have. It's just sometimes impeded by how unfair and annoying the CPU can get while you're playing. But you know, I really like how this one plays, and it's definitely one of the most out there concepts for an event. Like, Discus is such a average throwing event, so to turn it into like riding a frisbee, like, I don't even know how they came up with that. Not in the sense of like, oh, it's so wild, it's so out there, who could ever think it? It's just like, why did you think this was the best point for it to be here? Like, what, how exactly did you put this together? Like, I'm genuinely like interested in finding out. You know, that's one of the best things about the dream events, just when they get wild, you just sort of are inherently entranced by it, and I just really appreciate it for that alone. Next is Deluxe Halfpipe from Vancouver DS, and this is really the point where every event from here is just good, clean fun. And this also happens to be the first real event that has button pressing in a specific order quickly, which I just always love doing in any event or like Mario Party minigame. You know, it's a very simple pleasure, but just getting to do reaction-based button pressing is just always something I enjoy, even though I can't really explain why. It's just one of those lovely little things. You know, I don't really have any major gripes for this event, other than the fact that it does feel a bit arbitrary when you go off a ramp and you don't have much time to do tricks, but there's probably some knack to that I don't really feel the need to learn, because I just enjoy going off the ramps as many times as possible, you know? This is just an event where you can really just do whatever you want and have fun either way, whether you win or lose, even though I always enjoy winning, especially when it's easy AI. You know, I don't want to bring shame to my household by losing to them. Next is Equestrian from London, which is just straight up fun. Like, it has such a good amount of energy to it, the gameplay is really solid, the music really adds to the vibe. It's just so perfectly frantic in the way I'd want any dream event to be, and it is so satisfying getting all 7 eggs to the end, which does lead me to my only minor gripe, and it's very much a me problem. I only ever want to finish the event with all 7 eggs. Like, if I drop one, that's it, we restart. And the fact that I want to keep such a close eye on them does mean that I notice that sometimes when I lose an egg, it is kind of arbitrary. Like, it feels like if I do the exact same thing, depending on how many other tiny mistakes I've made, an egg will or will not fall off. So it just kind of feels hard to track exactly what's happening with the eggs. But away from that, I just love everything about this event. Like, especially the fact that it's all 4 characters right next to each other, hauling along a cart. It's just, I don't know, it makes it feel really teamy, and I love when events have that vibe, because with a roster as weird and wonderful as this game, it's always fun to see what kind of group of 4 you can put together. Next is Canoe from Beijing DS, another one that's just straight up fun. You know, it's a coin collecting game, so it's always nice to get as high of a score as possible, and the items are really fair, apart from the bloody blue shell that feels like it's gotten every 10 seconds, but never mind that. It just does sort of feel that I end up going in circles because the coin clumps never move, so you always just feel like you go around them all, and by the time you've done that they respawn, so you can go again and again, and it just doesn't feel like there's as much variety as there could be. Like, there is the amount you'd want from a event with this sort of gameplay style. It just feels like they could have done a bit more to just keep the coins as more of a active thing to go after, rather than just keeping them in the same place the whole time. Next is Curling from Vancouver Wii, another event where it's just really fun to put together the wildest and wackiest teams and just get on with it. My main thing with this one is just the fact that I don't really appreciate how finicky the stone tossing action can be sometimes. You know, there can be an ever so slight delay, which when there's the moving target in the Goomba, it does sort of feel like sometimes when I miss it, it doesn't feel the most fair. But, you know, this event is set in Sherbet Land off Mario Kart 64, so it's inherently a really cozy vibe. It's always fun to get a strike, you know, it is a bowling game after all, and pretty much everything about this game comes together. It's just the inherent controls of curling in this game just make it feel like there's a kind of unfair delay, but just sometimes. You know, I'm trying to be positive right now, I really want to be positive, but you know, this is just a little minigame collection that's a tie-in for the Olympic Games. You know, they didn't have to think out the events as much as they even did, so you know, it could have been worse. So any like nitpicks I'm doing right now, it's just for the sake of consistency. Like, I always want to say if I have a problem, I'm one of those people. Next is Supersonic Downhill from Vancouver DS, which, my god, it's not lying, this is the fastest I think any event goes in these games, and I really love it for that. You know, Obviously it can feel like you go too fast and that you can get unfairly eliminated sometimes, but you know, that's what the mushrooms and barriers are for. You know, you're meant to go out of your way to grab them, even if it doesn't feel like it's the fastest route. And I really love the sort of pathing games like that, where you need to be careful on what you do. You know, I like not inherently being rewarded for going as fast as possible because, you know, I like to take care and try and not make mistakes. So it's nice that it has that kind of balance. It's just, I don't know, I wish this game could go on longer. You know, the fact that it's so fast is over like nothing, but, you know, it's the perfectly reasonable length. It's just the speed again, so there's no real complaints. I just think that this is a really well executed event. Next is Fencing from London, which, you know, as you can tell, the fact that it has an actually different rule set to the standard event does propel it up the ranks a good amount compared to the Beijing versions. And I do think that the actual way it plays is really fun as well. You know, I think each player has a fair amount of health. The items are, you know, alright. They're not too intrusive, which is always good. It's just, you know, I think the rest of the events are better. It's as simple as that, you know, and that's the harshest thing you can say about it. You know, you got a good event. Next is Snow Machine Fight from Vancouver DS, which has a surprising amount of depth to it. Like, there's the whole charging up your shot thing that I didn't realise you could do for years, or there's the ice blocks that you can constantly go and destroy. There's just a lot to this event, and I really appreciate it for that. My only minute thing is that the arenas are slightly too big for there being 4 people. Like, it does feel like it can take a while before you bump into anyone, but at the same time it doesn't really feel like that's this event's fault, because why not go to every corner and explore this arena while you can? And I really love how there's multiple arenas as well. Like, they could have easily done just one and I don't think I would have complained, but the fact they actually went out of their way to do multiple is really appreciated. Next is Bobsleigh from Vancouver Wii, which is another one with an incredible sense of speed, and I do think it's overall more fun than Supersonic Downhill because there are so many more orbs to collect than just 5 mushrooms you can hold at once. I do think the obstacles are a bit more tedious than that event, but overall I just think it comes together a lot better. My only real issue with this one isn't even really to do with its gameplay, it's just the fact that while player characters always have a team of 4, any computers are only allowed 1 person in the bobsleigh, which, like, at that point, why not just have this be a 1-person event? You know, you really didn't need the whole team, did you? You know, that's kind of weird, but I can look past it. You know, I can live without having 16 characters on screen at once. For now. Next is Snowball Fight from Vancouver Wii. Like, the quintessential fun, farcical winter sport. You know, I'm so glad it was represented here, and to make it a proper 4-man team event is so inspired. And I like the layout of the overall map. You know, I know the bricks aren't that big of a thing, but it's really nice to have them to make sure you have some cover. And I really like the little things with this game, like the snowmen at the back that you can hit for bonus points, or the bullet bills that come in. There's just a surprising amount of layers to this that I think really works. It's just sometimes, you know, I'm really not in the mood to reload my snowballs, but by God does it just insist that I do it anyway, and that can kind of be a drag. But other than that, I just think that this was possibly the first Dream event that they should have added to a Winter Olympics game, and I'm so glad it was here. Next is Snowboard Cross from Vancouver Wii. By far the best snow-based race from that game. I just really love how it incorporates actual secret routes from the level it's based on. You know, you can go down the bridge rail and stuff like that, and the overall course is ridiculously fun. It's just the parts with the springs, they're just really confusing to me. Like, you bounce up, you think, oh, I want to go this way, and you just can't move. Like, you're stuck in the air, but you just can't move, and it just slows everything down to a crawl, and you can accidentally end up in the thick snow and go slower. It just doesn't feel like you have the exact amount of control that you want to in those specific parts, so it very slightly lets this mini game down. But away from that, I absolutely adore this one, especially the team version. The team version's really, really nice, especially for this event, because just working together, even if it's just like in the sense of not having items to throw at each other, I just think really brings the best out of this course. You know, it encourages speed more than the two ski based races. Next is long jump from Wii, which I've always found to be absolutely adorable. Like, just the fact that it references Yoshi's story specifically gives this such a unique look that I really appreciate. And just the way that this event plays in general is really unique and feels a lot more efficient than the Beijing DS event. My only possible gripe is that this is always the same course no matter what, so it's less a thing of it feeling repetitive, more of a thing of feeling cheated if I get knocked out too early, because I know the course. Like, why am I getting knocked out when I know the course? How is that fair? But, you know, away from that, this is a really sweet event that I really appreciate, and I like that this doesn't have items as well. Like, if any event didn't need items, it was this one. I'm so glad it doesn't. So yeah, I think they did all that they could with this. It just would have been nice if there was just a bit more variation in the course every time you played. Next is Roller Coaster Bobsleigh from Sochi, which, if nothing else, I can give credit to for not pretending to be a team event. But, you know, this event does look really fun. It really works with the fact that it's just one person per bobsleigh. I really like the bits where you have to try and balance yourself. I always have a lot of fun with those sorts of things, even if I'm quite horrible at them and don't really account how the model looks and how straight it looks. But, you know, fun's fun. But away from that, I do think that the rest of this event is slightly forgettable. You know, loads of different turns and chances to get on speed boosts and stuff. You know, nothing we haven't seen before, which isn't inherently a problem. It's just, it does feel like this event could have done more to set itself apart. Next is Curling Bowling from Vancouver DS, which I just feel like is a much more succinct version of the curling event from Wii. Mainly because you're on your own. You know, there's no getting other characters to sweep or properly getting someone else to aim for you. You just go it alone. It's a shorter lane. I feel it's a much more efficient way of doing it. Plus, I always love a good multiplier in an event, and chaining up the 2 and 3 rings, it's always perfectly satisfying. You know, there's nothing to hate about this event. I just think that the technical turns don't really add that much. Like, I would have preferred just the regular 10 as well, but that's just me wanting as big a score as possible, really. Don't mind me, you know. Apart from that, this is just absolutely amazing event. Next is Race from Beijing Wii, the first race-themed event in the series, and as you can tell, I still really think it holds up, you know? It's very Mario Kart, it's not got the most complex layout on the course, but for what it is exactly what it needed to be, you know? You've got a robust item system, the track changes hazards every single lap, you know? I really couldn't ask for anything more, so I'm happy with it. Next is Hole-in-One Curling, which I've seen get a lot of complaints about how slow it is, but like, it's golf. You know, it's golf 2 years before it was even called in the Olympics, so I can just appreciate it for being a more methodical and slower paced event compared to the ones that really shouldn't have been slow paced. And I just enjoy golf in pretty much any form, and especially competitively where all the stones are on the same map. I just think this event is just really cool. Next is Extreme Snowboarding from Vancouver DS, which is just another race minigame that comes together really well. But what I especially like about this one is how many, not secret, but just hard to reach secret paths it has. Like, especially the one behind the cones is so satisfying to get right. You know, this is another one that might have a few too many blue shells for my taste, and that jump near the end of the lap with the really tiny landing strip you can get to is slightly annoying, but I've rarely had issues with it once I know it's there. You know, this is just another really solid racing event. Next is Sprint from London, which is definitely one of the most unique racing games just because of its control gimmick. Like, I really enjoy the pinball aspect to all of this, especially how you have to sometimes make it bigger or smaller to get to certain routes. It just makes it really compelling to try and make yourself go at a specific speed at all times. You know, it's not just go as fast as you can, it's maybe slow down, maybe speed up right now. But hitting that one shortcut near the start, there's nothing like it in the series, you know. I do find the track gets slightly less compelling near the end, especially that secret path where you have to jump along multiple small platforms. Like, that can be really tedious, and the bit near the end where you have to just keep rolling in circles until you fall down and get to the final bit can be a bit of a drag, especially when someone can easily catch up to you there. But just, this is such a unique racing minigame, I can't help but appreciate it. Next is Fever Hockey from Vancouver DS, by far my favourite version of hockey, mainly due to the fact that you only work in a team of two, and they really take advantage of that with the passing mechanic. Like, charging up for a special shot is the most satisfying out of any event in the series, and combine that with the bonus gates, giving an item and a multiplier to the score. Just everything about this event comes together so perfectly. Like, my only possible gripe is that you can't play for longer. Like, I want to get as big a score as possible, but it is still a fun challenge trying to get as much as you can within the limited time. Next is Blazing Bobsleigh from Vancouver DS, another just really satisfying team event from that game. I never really understood the point of swapping who was in the front. You know, I just kept spamming that for fun. And I do find the stamina mechanic is sort of arbitrary a lot of the time. Like, I rarely, if ever, run out. But, you know, it's always fun to see the easy AI completely fail every time. But it's just everything about this, from the setting to the course, especially the underwater segment, is just so satisfying to get perfect, you know. And I do at least appreciate the risk versus reward of the split paths of whether you want more speed or more stamina. Next is Short Track from Vancouver Wii, which back in the day was my absolute favourite, just due to the fact that there was so much variety to it. Like, the consistently changing laps was always a lot of fun, and just trying to get it as perfect as possible was always a fun challenge. But nowadays I do find the controls to just be ever so slightly finicky, especially when it comes to turning. Like, my god, I swear the majority of the time I'm turning, it has that bloomin' stop turning so hard sign just constantly blaring, and it's just like, let me have fun, just say that I'm turning as hard as possible, just don't be such a ninny. But, you know, away from that, I do find a couple of the hazards to be kind of annoying to dodge, especially with the prevented overturning. And I do find the ramp at the end, while it's extremely satisfying to jump off, I do find it in combination with the fact that I'm trying to keep waggling and keep up speed, to suddenly have to change and do the jump, I can often mistime it and jump too early, as it's still registering the waggle as me trying to jump. But, you know, away from that, this is just such a good racing minigame, especially since it's a relay. Next is Ski Jumping from Vancouver Wii, another just incredibly satisfying high score minigame. Like, this is one where there's so many different little routes you can take, and while you can find one that's optimal, the amount of tries it takes you to get there, it just makes it all the more satisfying when it finally all clicks together. Just the only part that never clicks is the ending landing. Like, I feel that you just go on for a near unfair amount of time, to the point that it's almost like it doesn't want you to even dare try and land on the 100 point bonus, you know? But I find that's often a problem with, you know, landing in zones. It rarely ever lets you land in the middle. Next is figure skating from Vancouver Wii. Definitely one of the most iconic events due to the sheer farce of it. Like, I just really love how they take these standard Mario and Sonic stories and just make you dance through them. Like, what else could you ask for? And I do enjoy all of the different motions it asks you to do, although I do find that the jumping is harder to time than it should be. But my absolute favourite part of this event is the fact that on the lines where you're just waiting for the next thing to happen, you can just flick your Wii remote to the music and just gain bonus points. And I absolutely adore that. Like, even though you're the only one trying to do it with all the CPUs around you, you still get credit for it during team mode. Like, it's such a satisfying thing to do, and it's barely even mentioned during the game's instructions, so I just absolutely adore it for that, you know, cool little hidden mechanic. Next is Figure Skating Spectacular from Sochi, which is basically just a grander version of figure skating from Vancouver, you know? It's just even bigger and grander stories told, with like multiple different stories to the ice rink, and I just love it for that. Like, it's purposefully bigger and grander. The different types of moves that you do don't exactly look as simple and compelling as the ones from Vancouver, but you know, I can look past that when you're outrunning a giant Bowser or gathering all of the colours from Sonic Colors to destroy a boss from Sonic Colors, you know? Everything about it is just a step up from the Vancouver version, so what can I do apart from put it a step up from it? Next is Platform from Beijing Wii. By far the best dream event from that game, because it genuinely goes out of its way to do something completely unique, and I absolutely adore it for that. Obviously it has the reaction based button pressing, which I really appreciate, but just the fact that it's genuinely a different take on what this sort of event would normally be is just extremely unique for that tiny Wii Dream event roster back then. So I just can't help but adore it. You know, it completely fits into my taste. You know, some of the brick blocks and bullet bills are a bit arduous to avoid, but once you get through it, all of that just dissipates in my mind. I'm just happy to button press. Next is Rafting from London, which is 100% an event that is easier when you're working with computers compared to real people, where the AI can just follow your exact movements every time. But, you know, I've always played by myself, so I don't really mind in that regard. But this is just in general another really fun, high score based mini-game, you know? It does feel like there's a couple quiet patches that I think could have been zhuzhed up with a couple cheats going under, and the raft does get a bit tippy when you don't want it to, but you know, that's just raft physics, isn't it? You know, when an event is this good, I can look past its flaws, you know, it's fun. Next is Racing, a near perfect revival of the Sonic Riders series. You know, I just really appreciate how they took one of the new events from Tokyo and managed to just miraculously change it into the normal racing event of this game. You know, it's that sort of ingenuity that I really appreciate with Dream events, and it also helps that this has plenty of fun different paths, a nice item system. I always love a good rings for special move type of system. You know, everything about this event just comes together perfectly. I really wish here, above pretty much any other event, that there was a different course or even just a different railing layout, but still, you know, as the representation of Sonic's newest game, I don't think they could have done much better. Next is Race from Beijing DS, which, like, considering that this was one of their first goes at a Dream Racing event, they really just hit it out of the park. Like, the track's really compelling, the fact that they weave in hurdles along the track is always fun, the fact that you only need to stylus mash to get to your max speed, then you can just keep running, is so good rather than just having to worry about constantly flicking your stylus everywhere. Just absolutely everything about this event works, you know, even the alternate little path, which I don't think is faster, it just gives you like an extra item, you know, just even though it's the one of them and it might have done well to have a couple more, you know, I can look past it because just playing on the track in general is so much fun. Like, I genuinely don't know how they got it this right this fast. Next is Winter Sports Champion Race from Sochi. Definitely the event that I'm most envious that I've never gotten to play. Like, this looks like so much fun, you know, there's a different route for every single piece of equipment that you use, which is right up my street. You know, I feel like I'd have a lot of fun with this, you know, just trying to find the best route and the best equipment for each leg of the race, you know. I probably would get a bit tired of it once I knew what route I wanted to do, and I'd probably get annoyed if I wanted to use the skis but got snowboard instead, but just from what I've seen, this is just such a creative idea for a final event, you know. I always really liked the idea of, like, using all of the different types of equipment in different ways during one event, and this is one of the only ones that really uses it, you know, apart from like biathlon, but that's already a real sport. Speaking of which, next is ski shooting from Vancouver DS, just another incredibly fun high score based event, like getting a perfect chain of targets and then getting a 5,000 point gold is definitely one of the most satisfying feelings out of the entire series. And while I do like all of the rounds, round 3 is definitely my favourite just because of how fast paced it is, while still being relatively easy to get a high chain as long as you can see what's coming, you know. Just everything about this event works. Apart from the fact that sometimes the boss on the final stage doesn't attack enough times for you to actually be able to defeat him, but you know what? Oh well, I'd have gotten enough points in the rest of the event to already be happy. Next is Bullet Bill Sledge Race, which is surprisingly one of the only events to be set in one universe while predominantly featuring a character from the other. But, you know, I think this is one of the best ways they could have done that. I really like how you can charge up the Bullet Bill. It's not just he tugs you along and that's it. You actually got to work for him to go fast. You know, I always appreciate a good chargeable boost meter. And the course looks really fun. And it's got plenty of secrets, you know. I'm probably repeating myself at this point with all the different races, but they just absolutely know what they're doing. You know, they probably have both Mario Kart developers and Sonic Racing developers both working on these games, so we're just in the safest hands possible with these types of events. Next is Groove Pipe Snowboard from Sochi. Another event that's just a really fun race with plenty of alternate routes. You know, especially the one where you have to jump off the truck to get to the alternate path above the main one. Like, if I found that on my first time going around the course, I would feel like an absolute god. But, you know, just the rest of the track as well is just as fun. And I appreciate that instead of going for Moonview Highway or, I guess, Woohoo Loop, they went back a couple generations to pick a traffic course, you know? It makes this one feel like a lot more of a pointed reference, and I really appreciate it for that. Next is Spacewalk from London, by far the most out there idea for an event, but it just works, you know? It's kind of the synchronized swimming equivalent, which is just a really fun event to take from for a dream event, and just the way it plays and having to go through different types of circles every time, it just really keeps you on your toes in a good way, and it's constantly moving. And I also appreciate how they managed to fit layers into this event, like mashing 2 once you're zooming forward to get more damage, or waiting until he turns around during the second section to make sure you hit the tail. It's just little wrinkles like that these games have always done so well, and for them to be in such a weird event, you know, I can't help but love it for that. Next is Shooting from Tokyo. Definitely one of the most free and open dream events. Like, there are so many different routes you can take around the castle while still trying to aim to pick up free special shots before the kites start appearing. You know, it's one where it has a relatively rigid structure to it, but that almost benefits how freely it lets you run about during the rest of the time, you know? There's absolutely no notes. This is just a really fun, just roam about and pop gun things away type of event, and you just need that sometimes. Next is Basketball from Beijing DS. Definitely one of the most pure, fun point collecting events. Like, all of the different items are just so satisfying to get, especially when you can chain together a hoop lineup ball and a star to just get as many points as possible. Like, I just have so many happy memories of this game. It's so easy to try and go for a high score. Like, even at the start, when all of the hoops are just about lined up enough for you to throw your first ball and get a chain of 3, it's just, there are so many ways that this event just makes itself as fun as it possibly can. You know, there's absolutely no notes to it. Like, even the hazard item where it shoves a ball on top of one of the nets, that's not even that annoying because you still have 2 perfectly good hoops to aim for. You know, just everything about this event was designed to be fun, and I just absolutely adore it for that. It is by far my favourite dream event from Beijing DS, which, you know, it is a good selection of dream events from the first ever handheld lineup, but it's just something about Basketball is just so heads and shoulders above the rest, and it makes the others almost look like embarrassments in comparison, that they can't match the pure enjoyment that comes from it. But, you know, I still love Beijing DS. It's still one of my favourites in the series. Next is Hurdles from London. Another one of the most satisfying events to get perfectly right. Like, when the speed hits max and you can just jump over 5 hurdles at once, there is absolutely nothing like it. Like, yeah, sometimes you can't reach max speed and you just waste time going in reverse or getting your green shells on. Just when this event goes perfectly, it feels perfect. And even if it doesn't, it's still such a fun time, you know? I do find that the bunny hopping mechanic can get a bit tedious, especially when you feel like there's no way to avoid it, but when I'm playing against computers and I just constantly bounce over their head and bunny hop them, that's always satisfying. So that's much more of a human to human thing than anything. Just everything about this event works, and I'm so glad that there's a fun conveyor belt themed event, because conveyor belts are such an underused thing in the Mario and Sonic series. You know, I know that's quite a specific thing to say, and I'm just running out of tangents at this point, but conveyor belts just make sense to be here, and this shows why. Next is Intense Short Track from Vancouver DS. Just the culmination of everything that I've been praising racing events for. You know, it has a really fun stamina system. I love how there are secret paths that are found just by looking at what's in front of you and jumping into the boost rings. I love how when you speed over the cracked ice, it immediately causes it to break, which can be such a great way to screw over opponents. I love that as you go into the interior of the cruise ship, you can constantly press the buttons to try and screw over the people in front of you instead. There's just so many different ways that this plays perfectly as a racing event, and even though I don't think it's a direct reference like all of Vancouver DS's dream events, like, a Daisy Cruiser set event. Like, I don't know why more people don't use Daisy Cruiser for literally anything. Like, it's such a fun idea for a location that just needs to be used more often, and I'm so glad that even if it wasn't intentional, the devs fought to use it here. But the absolute cream of the crop of dream events is Trampoline from London. This just has everything that I love, you know, a secret mechanic where you have to constantly shake your Wii remote to the time while you're not jumping, constant reaction based button pressing, constantly upping the stakes, giving you more and more time each jump. It's just everything about this event is so addictive to go back and replay over and over, and there's literally no notes, no other words. Just if you've been paying attention, you can hopefully understand why I can gush for hours about this event, but you know, I'll spare you for today. Just reaction based button pressing good, trampoline good, Vector having the best record when you first get the game and play this for the first time, extremely good, the setting perfect, the music so memorable, talented, brilliant, amazing, everything and everything. This event is just the best, and I would happily pay £3 to get it on the eShop right now. You know, I don't need the whole Paris 2024 game, just give me Dream Trampolining off Mario and Sonic 2012. Thank you. So yeah, that's all of these fun little distractions ranks. I just find it a shame that more people don't talk about this series, because it feels like it had such a genuine cultural impact, at least during the DS and Wii days, and like I said, it's genuinely disappointing that there isn't a new game in the series for these Olympics. Like, I could go on about what I'd want to see from that potential game, but I don't know, it does sort of feel like the Dream events peaked back during the Wii and DS days. You know, they used all the best ideas they could think of there, and by the time they got to Tokyo, it was more about just referencing the most recent Mario and Sonic games before all else, which is a shame, but you know, these games are always fun for what they are. And you know, this isn't to disparage the main Olympic events either. Like, they're most of the time a lot of fun, even with their more basic controls that can sometimes be even more of a hectic rush. You know, 100 meters is more iconic than most of the Dream events. So either way you slice it, I just think this series deserves so much more credit than it gets for just being such a perfectly fun mini-game compilation. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, do let me know. Just, while it is a current shame that the Paris games are going without a Mario and Sonic entry, let's not forget that for the past couple Winter Olympic games, that Sega already lost the license to do Mario and Sonic games for them, meaning that they never got to go back to Beijing and properly witness and represent modern Chinese culture. But bye-bye. Have a nice day.